The alert is confirmed. Iran's IRGC has just declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. They have issued a direct order. Any vessel attempting to transit will be attacked and set ablaze. As of this moment, the artery for 1/5 of the world's oil supply is severed. Marine traffic has ceased. This is not a news report. This is a briefing on an active economic demolition. And because of this action, the world is now on a countdown. You have 14 days. That is not a metaphor. It is a literal, mathematical, unavoidable countdown to a global oil production shutdown. But what you are about to witness is not a conventional war. This initial move, it's too precise. It's the opening gambit in a surgical, economic takedown. And to understand who is holding the scalpel, you must first understand the design of the weapon they just deployed. The weapon they deployed was not a single missile. It was a symphony of coordinated strikes executed with chilling precision across the entire Gulf. It began with a direct hit on the heart of American command and control, the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Manama, Bahrain. Within minutes, plumes of black smoke were visible across the city skyline. This was a message, but it wasn't the only one. Almost simultaneously, reports flooded in of fires raging at the Fujairah oil storage terminal in the UAE. Then, Qatar's massive Ras Laffan natural gas facilities were hit. Key logistical arteries were severed as attacks forced the shutdown of both Abu Dhabi and Dubai international airports. The Bahraini government could only confirm a massive violation of its sovereignty. The strikes were surgically precise. Pay close attention, because this is the mechanism. While news channels focused on military escalation, they were missing the real story. The objective was never a battlefield victory. As one internal assessment stated with grim accuracy, this is a surgical economic demolition. It was a strategy designed to inflict maximum, unbearable pain on the global economy itself. These attacks are the reason the 14-day clock is now ticking. But the missiles and the explosions, they were just the trigger. The real weapon Iran activated that day wasn't military at all. It is a fundamental law of physics, now aimed squarely at the world's energy supply, and that is a weapon with its own unchangeable timeline. That unchangeable timeline is not political. It is physical. Pay close attention, because this is the mechanism that underpins the entire crisis. With the Strait of Hormuz closed, the roughly 20 million barrels of oil produced daily in the Persian Gulf have nowhere to go. That oil is still being pumped from the ground, but instead of flowing onto supertankers, it is being diverted into every available onshore storage facility. Picture this: a vast network of storage tanks with a single, system-wide capacity limit. A brutal simple equation is now in effect. When these tanks are full, the pumps must stop. In the industry, this event has a name. It is called hitting tank tops. A recent JP Morgan analysis confirms the mathematical certainty. Gulf producers have approximately 343 million barrels of onshore crude storage. With 20 million barrels of exports halted each day, that buffer is exhausted in an average of 22 days. But the system-wide average masks the immediate danger. The timeline varies by country, which is why the 14-day number is so critical. Kuwait has approximately 14 days of storage. Iraq has as little as 3. While Saudi Arabia is more resilient with around 30 days, the failure of one is a cascading failure for all. The system is interconnected. Once a critical mass of producers hits tank tops, they are forced into a full production shutdown. When this happens, the global oil supply does not decline. It falls off a cliff. And here is the most critical piece of intelligence you need to internalize. Markets do not wait for the physics to play out. They don't wait for the final barrel to fill the final tank. They price in the inevitable, and they have already begun. The reaction was not a gradual adjustment. It was a detonation. Within hours, the ticker for Brent crude, the global benchmark, went vertical. It surged from its pre-strike price of around $73 a barrel to over $80. This wasn't because a single tanker had failed to deliver. This was the market pricing in the inevitable future. Every tick of Kuwait's 14-day clock was being converted into billions of dollars of repriced risk. This is what the smart money does. It doesn't react to the news. It prices the consequence before it happens. To understand the scale, you must look at the precedent. The 2019 attacks on Saudi Aramco took 5.7 million barrels per day offline. That event, a fraction of our current crisis, caused a nearly 20% price spike in a single day. The choke point at Hormuz is holding back 4 times that amount. This is not a metaphor. It is a literal mathematical reality. And the success of Iran's strategy was in this cascade. Immediately, major manufacturers like Samsung and Toyota, whose just-in-time supply chains are the arteries of the global economy, saw their operations thrown into chaos. Quoted costs for parts, for shipping, for energy, they all became meaningless overnight. IMF and IIA models all project the same outcome. This level of oil shock guarantees a violent pass-through to inflation. And for American and British consumers already squeezed, this was a devastating blow. The numbers on the screen in London and New York translated directly to the price at the pump, the cost of a carton of milk, the stability of your job. But this widespread pain, this chaos, is not just random market panic. It's the symptom of a very specific and far more dangerous economic poison. A condition that has no easy antidote. This is the re-emergence of stagflation. And to navigate what's coming, you have to understand how this poison works. This poison works through a boomerang effect. The crisis unfolding in the Gulf is not a distant headline. It is aimed directly at the capital you manage. Your 401k, your brokerage accounts, your business's cash flow. The oil price shock is engineering the precise conditions for stagflation, high inflation colliding with decelerating growth. This is not a model. It's a mathematical reality already visible in the data. US gasoline prices just jumped 19 cents to $3,138 per gallon, the largest single-day spike since the 2022 Ukraine invasion. This functions as a direct tax on household balance sheets, draining discretionary spending capacity before it ever reaches the wider economy. Morgan Stanley's research models are precise on this. A 10% rise in oil lifts US headline CPI by approximately 0.35% over the next 3 months, directly contradicting the market's priced-in odds for rate cuts. Pay close attention, because this is the mechanism. Real consumption declines 2 to 3 months after the initial price shock and remains depressed for up to 6. That second-order effect translates directly into margin compression and brutal downward revisions to guidance for the S&P 500 beginning in the next 2 earnings quarters. The market has not yet priced this delayed impact. This event forces the hand of central banks like the Federal Reserve. It traps them. Their mandate to fight this new wave of energy inflation makes it politically untenable to cut interest rates to stimulate the slowing economy. That paralysis revives the classic 1970s oil shock recession dynamic. The kill zone for this regime is long duration, rate-sensitive growth stocks, and high-yield credit assets that retain value are found in defensives with pricing power and energy producers with direct exposure. Your broad index holdings are now a liability. This brutal economic sequence, from price shock to earnings collapse, is what makes our 14-day policy response countdown the critical inflection point. This is the window before that multi-month damage becomes locked in and fully repriced by the markets. But what if the key players discard economic logic entirely? What if, facing this breakdown, Washington makes a decision based not on market stability, but on pure political expediency? A full naval embargo, a kinetic strike, that makes the entire crisis irreversible. The countdown to economic impact becomes irrelevant. We are now approaching the political point of no return. That political point of no return arrived. Just as the global system was bracing for the 14-day impact, the hard stop, the physical limit, a second much longer fuse was lit in Washington. The original war plan, the one built by military strategists, assumed a 4-week campaign. A quick victory. But from the calm of the Oval Office, President Trump stepped before the cameras. With global diesel inventories already under 5 days and Brent crude futures locked limit up, he ignored the spreadsheets of his own planners. He announced the war would be extended. His new timeline: 100 days. This was not a strategic pivot. It was a complete departure from mathematical reality. A 100-day campaign is a commitment to a crisis over 7 times longer than the system's absolute 14-day physical tolerance. To the planners who built the original projections, this was the moment political ego officially overrode economic gravity. This wasn't just posturing. It was an operational directive. Leaked CENTCOM internal planning documents confirmed the shift. The request was for intelligence assets to support sustained operations in Iran for, quote, at least 100 days, but likely through September. The military was being ordered to execute a plan its own strategists knew would trigger a full-spectrum economic collapse. But when you corner a sovereign state and subject it to an irrational 100-day existential threat, the calculus changes. It is no longer about economic pain or strategic advantage. The response becomes existential, and Tehran was about to make a move that targeted not the oil markets, but a single, critical piece of infrastructure on the Arabian Peninsula, with a different kind of weapon entirely. Tehran's response to the 100-day gamble was not another attack on the oil markets. Their countermove was designed to bypass the economic battlefield entirely, escalating the conflict from a question of catastrophe to one of existence. This was not delivered through back channels. It came 5 days into the joint US-Israeli air campaign as a public broadcast. A senior Iranian military official, via the state-backed ISNA news agency, issued the signal. If Israel and the US seek regime change, our final effective missiles will strike Dimona. Pay close attention, because this is the mechanism. This was not a bluff. It was the application of a demonstrated capability. We saw the proof of concept in Chapter 2's surgical demolition in Bahrain, a strike that used ballistic missiles to achieve a circular error probable of less than 10 meters at a range of over 1,400 kilometers against hardened targets. That strike didn't just prove accuracy, it proved the ability to bypass top-tier missile defense. US and Israeli threat models were rewritten overnight because they now had mathematical proof that Iran could hold any target in the region at risk. Dimona was no longer an untouchable asset. The conflict was no longer about the price of oil. It was now about a radiological event in the heart of the Middle East, A successful kinetic strike on a live reactor core is not a simple explosion. It is an aerosolization event. The impact and resulting fires pulverize the nuclear fuel, ejecting weaponized fission products, cesium-137, strontium-90, into the atmosphere. This was the final, predictable outcome of the strategy. By pursuing explicit regime change, the US and Israel had cornered a rational actor. With its conventional options exhausted and facing annihilation, Tehran's calculus shifted from absorbing economic pain to ensuring regime survival at any cost. The Dimona threat was its logical final deterrent, a Samson option to make the cost of victory so apocalyptically high that it forces de-escalation. The firewall between economic warfare and existential warfare was breached. A strike on the Dimona reactor in Israel's Negev desert would send a plume of this material across Jordan, the West Bank, and into Saudi Arabia. We are not talking about abstract fallout. We are talking about rendering agricultural land sterile for generations, contaminating the region's critical aquifers, and forcing the permanent evacuation of population centers. For the global markets, this means the instant shutdown of airspace and shipping, paralyzing the very energy arteries this war began over. But as analysts priced in systemic risk, they missed the translation. For millions of people under that fallout cloud, this wasn't a choke point. It was home. It was home. For millions, the Gulf was never a geopolitical chessboard. It was a promise. Just months ago, a woman could walk alone at 4 a.m. through a street in Dubai, the polished marble reflecting the silent glass towers. The only sound the hum of street sweepers, preparing the city for another perfect day. Absolute safety. Tonight at 2 a.m, that same woman is awake in the dark. The only light is the cold glow of her phone, its screen showing a red pulsing circle over her neighborhood. Her heart hammers against her ribs as she does the math. The distance to the reinforced basement, the seconds it would take to get the children. The air raid siren has not sounded, but the warning is there. Sleep is impossible. This is not random. This is the direct, human bill for a deliberate strategic bet. The 100-day gamble. The tank-top calculations that saw a short, sharp systemic shock as a survivable risk are now being paid for in full by civilians. Behind the strategic papers are the project managers watching billion-dollar construction sites grind to a halt as insurance becomes unpayable. We're not talking about vague asset flight. We're talking about private bankers in the DIFC working past midnight, not on new investments, but liquidating client portfolios to wire the funds to Singapore. That is the sound of capital's real verdict. This dislocation is mathematically catastrophic. In the United Arab Emirates alone, 88.5% of the entire population consists of foreign workers. For them, instability isn't an abstraction. It's a binary question of visa status, of employment contracts rendered void by force majeure clauses. It's school fees paid for institutions that might not reopen. It is the sudden, brutal severing of remittance flows that are the lifelines for families in India, Pakistan, and the Philippines. For those of you who have built lives as expats or worked in these globalized hubs, what does this rapid collapse of a supposed safe haven feel like to you? Share your perspective in the comments. But this immediate personal trauma is only the first shockwave. The halt in Gulf exports extends far beyond oil, into petrochemicals, and critically into fertilizer. Pay close attention, because this is the hidden mechanism of the next crisis. According to the IRGC Institute, approximately 33% of the world's entire fertilizer trade transits the Strait of Hormuz.
Its closure is not a future problem, it is an immediate trigger. For a rice farmer in Vietnam, this is not a headline. It's a mathematical reality. The closure means the price of urea doubles or the supply vanishes entirely. That translates directly into catastrophic yield loss 6 months from now, into a food security shock that begins at the dinner table. From the sleepless nights in Dubai to the coming hunger in the Mekong Delta, that cascade is the mathematical reality of the abyss we have been analyzing. It is the predictable outcome of the path we are on. But there was always another option presented, a different way out. Now, the world stands at a crossroads, facing a choice between two, and only two, futures. The abyss, or the off-ramp. And in our conclusion, we will analyze precisely what that final off-ramp looks like. So the off-ramp. Here is the mechanism Iran has put on the table. It is not complex. It is purely transactional. A verifiable path to de-escalation. The offer is simple and clear. US forces withdraw from the region and the attacks stop. Imagine it. The drones are grounded, the mines are cleared, and the tankers once again move through the Strait of Hormuz. The artery reopens. The pressure on the global economy stabilizes. It's a return to a bitter, tense, but functional status quo. That is one future. The other is the abyss. The 100-day war for regime change. This is a catastrophic fantasy built on the same failed logic that has cost trillions and shattered a generation of stability. This path doesn't lead to a quick victory. It leads to burning cities, collapsing stock market charts from New York to Tokyo, and a prolonged global economic depression from which we may never recover. The tragedy, the final grim data point in this analysis, is that the system is accelerating toward the abyss. And this proves a truth that capital understands even if politicians forget. Recessions and wars do not care about politics. They don't check your party affiliation before they vaporize your pension. They hit ordinary people first and hardest. The core revelation of this entire briefing is this. The global system is far more fragile than our daily lives suggest. Its stability rests on choke points like this, controlled by actors who do not have our best interests at heart. If this analysis has given you a new framework for understanding these risks, subscribe for more briefings that cut through the noise, and share this video with someone who needs to see what's really at stake.